that they did. Once you realize what their intentions were, the meaning of the intention gives you the meaning of the action. And you say, that wasn't, such a nice action. It was fine that they did it, but they were doing it for purely selfish reasons. On the other hand, if you know that the person did it, even though they were late for work, they had people who relied on them, there were lots of other things they could have been doing, and they took their time to help the woman across the street simply because they thought it was the right thing to do, you say, well, that's a good person. I really respect it. I admire that. So Kant gives us those kinds of situations and many others and tries to remind us that he thinks this is what we really mean when we say someone did something that was good or right. We mean that they stopped themselves and they asked themselves, what's the right thing to do? And they did it because it was right. When we know the intention is pure, then we consider the action to be pure. That's Kant's idea, and he is a brilliant person in laying it out and explaining exactly how that works. Now remember, what he's trying to explain is how that works in your mind and in the minds of many others. John Stuart Mill has a very, very different theory. His theory is called utilitarianism. It's a long, long word, just comes from the word use. His theory says, let's forget about all the stuff of what's in your head and what are your intentions and all of that. And let's be more scientific about ethics. And let's just admit that ethics should be about promoting and producing the one thing that's good for every human being, which he thinks is happiness. He says, no human being is against their own happiness. Every human being believes that happiness is good. It's good for them. So why don't we treat ethics as the science of happiness, which is to say, when I act, my actions are going to have effects in the world. Think of a pebble being dropped in a pond. If it's a small pebble, it's going to affect a few people around me. If it's a large pebble, it affects more people around me. And I am responsible, Mill says, for the consequences of my actions. So when I act, the good act is the act among my various choices. I could have done this, I could have done that. The good act is the one that produces more happiness and less misery. If I have a choice between two actions, I should ask myself, who's going to be affected and how will they be affected? If there are 10 people who will be affected, and if I choose action A, and 8 of them are going to be miserable and 2 are going to be happy, and I choose action B, and 8 are happy and 2 are miserable, Mill says, obviously, the better action is the one that will produce 8 happy people as opposed to 2 happy people. So he tries to lay out a more or less scientific theory of ethics, which says there are ways to measure happiness. So for example, if I perform an action and it only affects 3 people, I should ask who's going to be happy, who's going to be sad. But I also need to take into account, well, how happy and how sad, right? Because if I have $100, I could give it to my buddy and he's going to buy, a video game. That would make him happy for a while, a little bit happy. But I could also give it to some starving people, and it's going to bring much more happiness to them than to my friend. So you begin to realize that it's not just how many people are happy, but how happy are they, how intense is their happiness, how long does it last, things like that. So Kant and Mill have very, very different ideas about ethics. Third theory is Aristotle's, and Aristotle is the one who would step back from all these specific questions and ask a question. He says it's the question of character really that matters. So the laziness example I gave you earlier would be one that Aristotle would focus in on. He would say, if you just focus on the moment to moment, this action or that action, you lose the big picture. And the big picture is this. You will be, 20 years from now, the product of what you do today. You will be, 20 years from now, whatever you do today. And whatever you do today is not so much all those dramatic decisions, which college do I go to and who do I marry? Those are important, but it's really the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of daily decisions that you make all the time about, should I get up 10 minutes earlier to exercise? Should I have that extra hamburger? Should I lie on this test? Should I tell my girlfriend where I was? All of these daily little decisions are decisions, he says, that ultimately shape your character. And if you cut corners, or you're lazy, or you're, whatever it is, whatever habits you develop, whatever choices you make in your daily life as a young person, ultimately you will receive in the form of your character. You will be lazy if you make lazy decisions now. So for him, ethics is a question of what kind of person do I want to be? What is a better kind of person to be? And he thinks that even though a lot of you will have different opinions about that, there are lots of things he thinks you should agree on. He's going to say laziness is not as excellent, not as good as someone who is, let's say, diligent in their work. He's going to say someone who is a coward is not as good as someone who is courageous. And he thinks you'll agree. So, Aristotle steps back from these dramatic ethical decisions and focuses more on the question of character over the lifetime of the individual. Thirdly, Carol Gilligan, philosopher who's still alive, or a psychologist really, who's still alive, argues that these men are really, really smart, but they have missed something pretty important. Pretty important. And these theories that we've looked at, especially Kant and Mill, to some extent Aristotle, are very rational theories. They're very intellectual theories. And they argue that human emotions are kind of problems for ethics, that we should put emotions aside and be rational when we decide how we should act. Kant and Mill, as well, are very, very individualistic philosophers, so they really focus on what decision should the individual make. Aristotle, not quite as much. But Gilligan says, most of us learn right and wrong, good and bad, from mommy and daddy. And mommy doesn't think like Kant, mommy doesn't think like Mill, mommy doesn't think a lot like Aristotle. The defining feature of a good mother, Gilligan says, is her care. Not in the simple sense that she cares about you, no, but that she cares for you. And caring, Gilligan says, is way underrated. The care that an excellent mother shows for her child is a very, very difficult set of skills. But these skills are not so much abstract skills that you read about in a book. They are personal skills. They're the skills involved when you are engaged in other people's lives, not when you stand back and try to figure out what's right and wrong, but when you're involved and engaged at a very deep, emotional, intimate level. That's when ethics really becomes difficult. That's when the skills really make a difference. If someone, a friend for example, do they know how to listen to you? Do they care enough to pay attention to see when you're not feeling well, even if you don't know it? Can they see in you some problems, some issues, some things that they can help you with, things that may even be invisible to you? That's a great friend, right? Gilligan says we need to spend a lot of time thinking about those kinds of things because the men who've done ethics for a long time don't talk about them at all. In fact, they just throw them away. All this emotional stuff, we don't need that. Gilligan says, yes, we do. So her theory is called care ethics. So we have duty ethics with Kant, utilitarianism or be useful ethics with Mill, character ethics with Aristotle, and care ethics with Gilligan. So again, each of these theories is a theory that's trying to say what you say to yourself without knowing it when you make ethical decisions, when you say that's right or wrong or good or bad. These are 4 languages, you might say, or 4 ways of describing what that means when you do that. In that sense, all of these theories function as a mirror on you and a mirror on our society, right? So you read these theories and you're going to say, boy, that's my uncle. That sounds just like my uncle. So it's holding up a mirror to him, right? And a lot of times it's going to say, that, yes, that's what I think. I've never put it that way, but now I see. That's what I believe. That's what I think. So these theories are attempts to bring out what's already inside you so that you can see it and examine it and say, boy, I don't like that. Now I see, who I am, and I don't like it. I need to change it. Or you say, for the first time ever, someone has said, now I see who I am, and now I see more clearly what I care about. That's the goal of using these theories. So one final word about this. Each of these theories conflict in certain ways, but they overlap and agree in different ways. And I want to make one point about this. The theories don't always disagree about what you should do, but they do disagree about why you should do it. So just some simple examples. I think all of these theories would say it's good to help people in need. Okay? Someone's in need, they're hungry, they're sick, etc., and you have the ability to help them. It's a good thing to do, to help them. So they agree on that, but if you ask Kant, but why? What is it about helping someone that's good? What makes it good? Kant's going to say, well, it's the same thing that makes any action good. It's the nature of your intentions. So, let me be clear, Kant would say. If you help other people because you want to get something in return, then it's fine that you help them, but don't you call your action good, because your intention isn't pure. That's what matters, he says, when you help someone. Mill's going to say, Kant, you're crazy, right? Who cares about what's in your head? If you help people, they get help. Good. Now, the only question is, was there something else you could have done to help other people even more, or to produce even more happiness in the world? It's entirely possible that you have lots of money and you have different choices, and helping these few people, in fact, is going to produce a lot less happiness than some other action, so you should have done that because that would have produced even more happiness. But he's still going to say, in general, if it's an everyday circumstance and one of your options is to help people, it's good to help them. He's going to say, because, not because your intention is good, but because you're producing happiness, which is good for everyone. So they agree it's right to help people, but for very different reasons. Aristotle is going to say, yes, it's good to help people, but not because of your intentions and not because it produces pleasure or happiness. It's good because it's part of a life lived in the pursuit of excellence, the excellence of character. And generosity is one of the marks of a person of excellent character. So it's good for you to do it because it's part of the habit, part of the practice of making you your character into something that's excellent. And Gilligan will talk about helping someone else as an expression of care, right? As a way of building a relationship with these people, of establishing intimate, strong, personal bonds with other people, and helping them is one of the many ways that you express your care for them and your interest in living in close, loving, caring relationships with people. So notice, everyone has said, yeah, you should help people. But they give very different reasons for that. So because they have different reasons, there's potential for a lot of conflict. So then we could come up with lots of scenarios where they would disagree about what you should do, because behind their reasoning are these fundamental ideas, these fundamental reasons about what makes an action, what makes a life, what makes a person good or bad. So that's an introduction to some of the theories and some of the ideas that we're going to be studying in this class. The theories will take up about the first half of the semester. We're going to deal with relativism, some other issues as well, and then do the 4 theories, and then the rest of the class is going to be applying these theories and using them and testing them and really seeing what I've been promising to you, which is that whenever we argue about ethics, we really are using one of these 4 theories for the most part. Now, we're also going to deal with the question of religion and ethics, and I look forward to talking with you about that. That's always a really interesting discussion, and we'll have more than one discussion about that, but I think I'll stop for now and let you rest, and hope you took some good notes. You can always go back to this lecture at any time, refresh your memory, come to class with some good questions. I look forward to them.